Let's raise a glass, ladies and gentlemen. Glass. The downtown hotel's ballroom went quiet while Richard Keller, my supervisor, stood on the podium. His words echoed loudly, the velvet curtains and chandeliers, champagne. Every face turned to him. Their hands held dazzling flutes. It was intended to be a festive evening, the introduction of our most recent product range. I devoted 2 years of my life into it. Life into. The one I had given up birthdays, weekends, and even the finale a few months during my marriage. However, Richard had other ideas. He smirked and replied, "She's leaving." Across the room, his eyes met mine. She never had the necessary skills. There was a burst of courteous laughing throughout the room and cheering, akin to trained seals reacting to the signal of their master. My name wasn't even brought up. I was only she. Throw away. My throat constricted, but I didn't flinch. I carefully stood up and brushed the hem off my blazer and took the envelope. All evening I had been carrying. My hand didn't tremble when I approached the podium. I said, "To Richard," as I lifted my glass. I spoke in a steady, almost serene tone. From the largest failure of the company, I placed the envelope before him and swung on my heel. No protest, no tears, nothing but quiet. I heard the paper rip behind me. Richard's voice broke then. What the devil is this? However, I continued to walk. Let me introduce myself. My name is Harris, Linda. I was 43. And prior to that evening, I was in charge of Stone Mount's product development technologies, among the quickest in Chicago expanding businesses. I provided it for 11 years. Business everything. I began as stayed late as a junior analyst when others left early while carrying tasks, whereas CEOs like as Richard stated the credit, and I had faith in it. I felt that if I put in enough effort, if I could prove myself, I would have earned the acknowledgement I was due. However, I was mistaken. 3 weeks prior, Richard summoned me to his workspace. He reclined in his chair made of leather, all fake charm and manicured self-assurance. You've been working hard, Linda. However, this launch requires a new face, vitality, a youthful person. We'll have, instead, Jason was there. The intern I trained, Jason, 25 years old, well-groomed, and without experience. I gazed at Richard, anticipating the joke. "I'm sorry. You will continue to participate in the team," he remarked mockingly. "However, we need to give investors a better dynamic boss. Avoid taking it personally. Don't be upset about it. I became aware that I had no future at Stone Mount. Not because I wasn't able, but since Richard had made the decision, I was disposable, interchangeable. He was unaware that I had previously noticed his empire's flaws. 4 months, I had observed anomalies in the reports. Results of product testing things didn't match, and the expenses were approved. Without the appropriate paperwork, inflated investor slides, and performance indicators. Each time I mentioned them, Richard dismissed me with a wave. "Once more, you're overanalyzing, Linda. Pay attention to the product." However, my gut told me otherwise. Additionally, I had instincts don't lie, as I've long known. I therefore began to keep documents, copies of notes from meetings, emails, and reports, carefully and quietly. Not because I wanted to retribution. Not just yet, but due to something whispered in my gut that one day I'd require them. That day arrived earlier than I anticipated. On the launch night, I was aware of Richard had a strategy. The smile, the toast, the rejection cloaked in a joke. He desired to degrade me, to demonstrate, the board that was under his authority, that he could eject the lady who'd constructed the exact item they were festive. However, I had no intention of leaving, silently. I put the envelope on the podium. It was more than paper. It was the final result of 6 months of documentation, proof of falsified product information, fraudulent safety certifications, as well as investor reports that have been altered, all under Richard's guidance. There were copies inside, numerous agreements and memoranda that demonstrated our The product they hailed as their flagship hadn't passed critical that evening. Safety examinations, which Richard had interred those outcomes to expedite the launch and attract investment. Furthermore, I wasn't alone, someone who possessed them. As I left that ballroom, beyond the applause colleagues and the interns with wide eyes, I felt an odd serenity descend upon me. For I wasn't, for the first time in months, fearful. I didn't immediately return home. I chose to drive in the rain instead, Chicago's slick streets and headlights blending in with the glass. My palms clutched the steering wheel, my thoughts reliving the costs I had incurred. The meals I'd missed, the arguments with my daughter Emma, with my spouse, which ultimately ended in divorces, for a business that had determined I was useless. However, they had misjudged me. Richard believed that I would break down, that I would accept the insult and quietly disappear. However, he didn't realize I had previously been in touch, someone who was particularly curious about what I had located. His chuckle at the podium continued to reverberate in my ears as I entered my driveway. This time only, it wasn't me who was made fun of, since Richard Keller was unsure of how his dominion was on the verge of disintegrating. I wasn't finished yet either. When I awoke, the following morning, the sun shone through the blinds, but the tranquility in it. My phone was buzzing for half an hour already, a dozen times. Richard's missed calls, 2 from Mary Ann, our HR director, 1 from an unknown phone number. I ignored them all. Rather, I brewed coffee. I gazed at my kitchen table while sitting there. I had carried the briefcase home months earlier. Within, under layers of typical documents, were files I had been, since Richard assumed the role of CEO 18 months prior. The anomalies appeared to be minor. Journey-signed expenses without receipts, bonuses are given out without a board acceptance. Then it got out of hand. Product security outcomes changed. Instructional emails before investors, staff should rephrase the figures. Phone calls. Agreements made with suppliers that didn't deliver. I ought to have departed at that time, but a piece of me thought I could make it right. That my position was, I had provided extra in order to safeguard the business, more than 10 years of my life. Right now, as I discovered this when I opened the briefcase, was no longer about defense, stone mount. It has to do with safeguarding myself and perhaps just possibly defending those who had faith in the business goods with their life. By midday, the voicemails replaced the calls. "It's Richard, Linda. We must speak. You've done